Welcome to my tutorial. This is a short lesson on how to structure your projects under TFS. I'm going to show you how branching works and how to structure it so you can branch. And this again is coming from my experience, the way that I have done it in the past, but there's many ways to do it, obviously. And this is one of the ways that I have seen that it has worked for me. The first thing that you'll notice is that on the left you see my TFS server. I actually got this at visualstudio.com. I signed up and now I have a small Visual Studio TFS available to me from Microsoft. Under my collection I will have individual projects, but the way that I do it is I will use this project as a repository, and then under my repository I will have folders that will represent a hierarchy. And it all depends on how you want to do it. This is just one of the ways, many ways that you can do it, and that I found that works for me and teams and the teams that I work with. So under test repository, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a folder called web services, because this is where I will keep all my web services under this folder. And the gist of this is if you want to keep, you want to create another folder called front end, where you will keep your mobile apps, your desktop console apps, and so on. You can do that also, creating the folders. Again, the other way you could do it is actually creating individual projects at this level instead of at the project level. And then once you create your individual projects, you will have multiple projects here that will have the top level hierarchy. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just creating folders here. So once you create your folder, I'm just going to check this in. And I'll say first level of project. I'll check that in. And now we have a folder under my project. Now my project, the test repository, has been mapped to this particular folder. So if I click on this, now I have a project here. So what I usually do is under web services, you may have one or many, or just maybe one web service, but you may want to keep adding to your web service folder because you may have different web services that do different things. You may not just have one. What I usually do is I will create a folder for each individual project. So for example, let's just assume that I'm creating a new web service for a client. I would create a folder here and I would call it Client A API. Okay, so my Client A API is going to contain all my source here, so I'm going to do that. And I would check this in. Do that. And then under Client A API, I'm going to create different hierarchies for my main trunk, my development branches, and my release branches. And you can even go as far as adding hot patches, hot fixes here. So under Client A API, I'm going to have three folders. I'm going to have a main, which should come up in a minute. This is unusual of TFS, it's usually quicker. So I will say main. Then I will create another folder under this if it lets me once it does its thing. And then I will create another folder called development. press enter. Hopefully it won't take as long. So now I have two folders here. I have a main folder and a development folder. And then I'll also create another folder for releases. And this is where all our release branches will come in. What you want to do is you want every branch to come from main, being main, that is your main trunk. So I will say releases, press enter. And everything should always really branch back to your main trunk, so that if you have any type of new project or new enhancement, you can always branch off main, knowing that the main trunk has the latest production version. So now once you have these three folders, now I can check this in, check these three items in. And we're ready, almost ready to go. Obviously you need the code. So let's create a web service, a web API service project. So let's do file, new, and then we'll create a project. And we're going to create an ASP.NET web application. And I'm going to say add to source control. And my location will be under the main folder, because that's where I want to keep all my code. So what I'll do is I will take that location, web services, client API, and then main. I'll take this, copy this, which is just where I mapped my folders to. And I will name this client application whatever my API is, which is, let's just call it client API, just to keep it consistent. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say create a directory for my solution and add my add to source control. So I'll just click OK. It's going to ask me for the type of project, so I'll say web API, and it doesn't really matter. So I will just go ahead and say OK. Once I click OK, it's going to create my project for me under main. And this should take a little bit. Once I've created my project, as you see on the right hand side, I want to actually add all these items to my source control under main. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here. First of all, I'm in the main folder. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to say add items to folder. You're going to see that there is a client API, which is the solution here. You click on finish, and that's going to take a little bit of time to add to my folder under main. So now if I click on client API, it has my solution file, and it has everything in my project. So now I have my project within main. All I have to do is now check this in. I will check this in as the main version, and we will check these items in. I will pause until this is done. Okay, it's done. So now the folder structure I have is I have a main folder which has my main trunk. I have all my files under here with my solution file, and I have these development and releases folder, which I will let you know what they are in a minute, what they are for. So say for instance I want to create, let's say I've done release for main, we work off main, the main branch, and we want to branch off a development version for this because they want to create some enhancements. So the first thing is you got to make main a branch. So I would right click on main, then you can say convert to branch, and just say there's main branch for code, and you're going to convert. Now main is your main trunk, and now I can branch off from main to development for any versions that I want to work on. So let's say that with this particular one, we currently have our production version in main. I want to do some enhancements, so I will say right click on that. I'm going to branch, And be careful where you branch to. Make sure that you're branching to the development folder. So I would say development. And we can call this enhancement 1. And we can just say branch. Make sure that this is the latest version. And it's going to say the new branch we created, committed a single operation. Yes, you want to continue to branch. So what this will do is it will create a replica of your main branch as another branch under development. So what essentially what I could do is I can have multiple branches here for development. So if I want to do another enhancement which may be running at the same time as enhancement 1, I can just branch off again. So I will branch to the development folder, and we can call this enhancement 2. Okay, let's branch off main, and you can just branch, yes. And now these guys are both independent of each other, and enhancement 2 will work on his own branch, his own code, his own version of the code, of the production code. Now this is a situation where they both have nothing to do with each other. You may have a situation where they do have to kind of step on each other, and that's fine, because you can either have one branch where two people work on the code, or you can just have two branches, and then when this guy is done with his work, he can merge back to main, and then main will have the most up-to-date branch. But again, you have to keep versions in terms of a version control person. So there has to be somebody that's a source code master to make sure and coordinate these releases. But I'm just giving you the simplest situation. There's many ways to handle it, and I will go into this in later videos. So now you have two branches here, and let's say enhancement 1 is ready to go. So let's actually make believe that we are working under enhancement 1. Just going to get the latest version from enhancement 1. Okay, so now I've downloaded enhancement 1 to my local machine. I'm going to open it up, and this is under enhancement 1. So if I right click on the solution and I look at the folder where I'm currently at, open folder in File Explorer, I am under enhancement 1. Now the other thing I want you to look at is that you got to make sure that your main and your development branches are similar or are exactly the same, because I just branched it off main. So main should be exactly the same as enhancement 1. The way to do this is you can just right click on the branch, you can compare. It's going to bring up, you can leave this as is, and then here you're going to go into server path, into main, click OK. So it's going to compare everything between branch 1, enhancement 1, and the main trunk. So you click OK, and it says 341 files compared, 0 different, 0 only in source, so everything looks good. Now if I'm going to make a change in the enhancement 1 branch, which I am under, let's say I'll make a change here. I can just make an enter here. So now I've checked this out. I'm going to check this in. I need a huge change. Check that in. And now I'm going to go back to source control. And I'm going to compare my branches again to see how they're similar and how they're different. Now that I've checked in my change, now I'm going to say compare. We're going to go into the server path and compare to the main branch. Click OK. And then you'll see that there is a difference between these two files. And that's the beauty of branching, is that it tells you what's different, what's the same, what's different in the source, what's different in the target, so that you don't mix up your code. So now once you have this enhancement 1 ready to go, now you have to merge to main. So, and that's very, very easy. You can right click on the enhancement 1 branch and you can merge to your main. You can say, oh, leave that as is. You're merging to main, latest version, click finish, and that's going to perform that merge operation. So if you have many lines of code that are going to be merged, you can just merge that back to main. Now if you notice, main doesn't really have the latest changes until you check main in. So if I go into client service API and I go into the actual folder of the code, you will see that this has a merge edit pending change by me. Once you're ready to commit your changes and you're ready to release to production, we can actually we'll have to check this in, because in a real world scenario what you want to do is release your code from the main branch. So what I can do is just right click here and check in my pending changes, and we'll say massive change, and you check that in. Now while this is all going on, enhancement 2 is being developed, so you really don't have any conflict with enhancement 2. Main will get the changes from enhancement 1 and it'll be ready to release to production. The other thing you may want to do is, once you release something to production, you may want to branch from main to release. So I can say branch this to my release folder, releases, and then I can say enhancement 1 and just have a naming convention, say this was released on 12/01/2016, and that'll be the name of that branch. So I can branch that out. Yes. And then if you notice, it's going to create another branch called enhancement 1. Now the good thing about this is, and what I like about this is, if this has been released and there is a bug in enhancement 1, you can either go back to main and work from main, and that's fine, or if you don't want to touch main and you just want to work on enhancement 1, you can just work off this release branch and work on that as a hotfix. And then once you're ready to check in your changes, you can always merge back to main as the latest version. Now suppose that we've done all this, everything looks fine, and now enhancement 2 is ready to go. Enhancement 2 now doesn't have the changes of enhancement 1, but we can merge main to enhancement 2, so that enhancement 2 has all the changes that we did in enhancement 1, because again everything trickles down to main. So I can say, okay, let me merge main to enhancement 2, and then that will give me all the current changes from enhancement 1. So if I compare enhancement 2 to main, okay, yes, it's going to have this difference because I have not checked in my changes under main. Sorry, under enhancement 2. So enhancement 2 still has a pending change over here. So you always got to remember that you got to merge and then check in. So I can check this in. And voila. So now if I do my comparison here, I want to compare enhancement 2 to main. Click OK. Should have no differences. Now that's the beauty of it. So now you have whatever enhancement 1 changed in enhancement 2. And enhancement 2 really shouldn't conflict because you will be working on different files than enhancement 1 has. But if the case comes that there is some type of conflict, then you can always take a look on the comparison end as to what has changed and what you need to do to actually accustom your code to what's been released to production. So this is the end of this lecture in terms of branching. I hope you found it helpful, and I feel that this structure has helped me in the past, and it's very, very flexible. So and again, there's many ways to do this. This is just one of many that you can do. One other caveat about this is that you may end up with a lot of branches under development. So what you could do is create an archive folder under development and start branching out or copying your branches up onto that archive folder, and that's very easy to do. So what I can do is I can just right click, create an archive here, and once I have that archive folder, then I can start moving any branches that I want so that my development folder doesn't get overpopulated with branches. Your development folder should only have the branches that are currently being worked on, really. It shouldn't have anything more. So I usually like doing the archive way so that I don't confuse myself or confuse the team that there's other branches on there and what do we do with those branches. Thanks for listening, and I hope you found this helpful. I'm always looking for new ways to do things, so if you want to comment and let me know of other ways that you've done source control, please let me know. Thanks.